Hi everyone, my name is Nika and I'm presenting with Ben, Tyler, and Abby, and we are presenting on Generation X, specifically Elon Musk. And so a little bit of background about Elon. He was born in South Africa in 1971, and he moved to the US by the time he was ready to come to college and went to the University of Pennsylvania. He was always very interested in computers from like a very young age. He made a video game when he was a kid, and he obviously studied physics and economics, which is a very direct combination of what he does now. We all know him as the Tesla guy. And he also describes himself as being very introverted and focused on reading, and that's kind of how he sparked a lot of interest in science and then eventually led to the things he did in his career. So beginning in the 1990s, he co-founded a company called Zip2, which is kind of like a combination between Yelp and Maps, if you think about it like that. And then in the late 1990s to 2000s, he created X.com, which later became PayPal, and sold that. And then in the 2000s, he founded his company that he's probably most known for, SpaceX, and also joined Tesla as a main investor and CEO. And then in the 2010s to present, he expanded into projects like Neuralink, the Boring Company, and then he also bought Twitter, as we all know, which he then renamed to be X. And Neuralink is actually something that sounds so crazy and futuristic. I had to look it up because I wasn't really sure what else he was involved in, but it's a technology that allows people who maybe have mobility issues or are paralyzed to control robotic arms with their mind. And it's obviously still developing, it feels like something that's very futuristic, but he is doing crazy projects like this. And then the Boring Company is actually this tunnel system that he's working on developing. Instead of there being traffic all above ground, he's making these tunnels that are specifically only for electric cars, that are underground and can kind of help combat traffic issues. So he's kind of just really pushing the boundaries of these crazy futuristic things that feel impossible but are in the works. Okay. So his leadership style, beginning with visionary approach, he's always looking to the future. From the moment he got to college and graduated from college, he was constantly just pushing the boundaries of what can the world look like 10 years from now, and what can I do to make the world a better place 10 years from now with technology specifically. He's also a very inspirational person. Obviously, he has some controversial political views sometimes, and whether you agree with him or not, he has done some really insane things that can really attract top talent to his company, which is what is constantly pushing the limits. And then he's always challenging the status quo. He's doing things that no one else does, things that are just so bizarre, and aiming for things that have never been done. And he also has very high expectations for his workers and for all of the deadlines. So he creates really ambitious deadlines for things, creates ambitious goals, but he also does deliver on those as well. So all of this together is what ultimately makes him a transformational leader. And now Tyler is going to take us through some of his strengths and weaknesses.
What button do I press? Okay.
Come on.
All right, so I'm going to take you guys through Elon's communication style. Whether you love him or hate him, he's been a very transformational leader. What makes him effective also makes him very controversial, though. But I'm going to walk you through some of his strengths first. He has a very clear and compelling vision for all of his companies. We see with SpaceX, he wants to go to Mars. We see with Tesla, he wants to do self-driving vehicles. He has those visions that he's seen for so long, and he's trying to put them into fruition now. He's also very direct. When he has the vision, he has to be direct with that and have unfiltered messaging. I think that's a strength for him, but it can also be a weakness at times. But I think that's overall a good strength. He can be really direct with his leadership team and implement those decisions. I also think he's a very strong external storyteller. So when he is launching a new car, or like this, we've all seen the Cybertruck presentation, that went horribly wrong. He still made a lot of people buy the Cybertruck, and so he was able to effectively, tell the story of where he came up with that idea, and then how it's progressed into what it is today. And then I'm going to move over to the weaknesses. He has a very inconsistent tone. I know we've seen with the political spectrum these days, he backed Trump in the election, and then kind of really switched his tone once he was in office, and was not agreeing with a lot of what he was doing. And we were seeing all that develop over X, and they were kind of beefing at first, and so that was a great time to be on X. He's a very reactive communicator, especially on X. Let's read this one. Should I step down as head of Twitter, I will abide by the results of this poll. Yes, 57%, 17.5 million votes on that. And he stepped down. So he reacted to his own poll to step down as the CEO of Twitter after he bought it. So yeah, and then we have internal alignment challenges. Just that's a weakness of his because he's so visionary. Things can get kind of backlogged with his leadership team and may not be aligned. Okay, so some of the key challenges that we're faced with as companies. I kind of split them into 4 different categories. We have the operational risk. So he has very aggressive timelines for his products. For example, with Tesla, they only sold 336,000 vehicles in Q1 of 2025, which was down 13% from the prior year. So that can be a risk with his big visions. He may set too big of goals. And that also comes with scaling manufacturing and just, their factory in Texas is huge, and it can create a lot of backlogs in that system. Reputational risks. His public statements really impact the markets. There's a lot of social media posts that he does that really contributes to a lot of volatility. I'll get to that one down there. And then we have leadership sustainability. Tesla has one of the highest employee turnover rates. They get a lot of burnout employees, which is about 30 to 40% of employee turnover. And then executive turnovers with 27% of top leadership that is turned over in that company. And then regulatory pressure. He was actually, he got some scrutiny from the SEC because he tweeted that. It says, "Am considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured." And that made Tesla stock, as you can imagine, just go absolutely wild once he tweeted that out. So yeah. But as you know, Elon is a very transformational leader. We can see with the EV market transformation, he accelerated global EV adoption. You've said in the past that he made driving an electric car cool. And when you're driving on the freeway, you see so many Teslas because they're a successful brand and they're a successful car, and they are the. I was going to get into it in a second, but they are the leader in the EV market, and it's forced legacy automakers like Ford, a lot of the American brands, even a lot of the European brands to really shift their focus to the EV market. And then we have the space industry disruption. He was able, with SpaceX, to reduce the cost of space launches with Falcon 9 and being able to return and land safely. That saved up hundreds of millions of dollars. And then we have increased access to commercial space, and they actually set an industry record with 134 launches. And then we have the cultural impact on innovation. He normalized just bold and high-risk goals like getting to Mars. That has shifted to, I think he wants to colonize the moon now, but he still is not throwing out of the Mars out of the works. We're going to see people on Mars in our lifetime, which is crazy. And yeah, he just completely shifted expectations for a lot of the innovation speed that we see. We never thought we'd have EVs, and even the self-driving feature of the EVs on the roads, 10 years ago, we would have never thought that was possible. I'm going to pass it to Abby for financials.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on into financials, just to show another way we can measure kind of Elon's success is how he's been able to lead his companies into financial success. Let me go ahead and decide. So specifically, we're going to look into Tesla and then kind of compare that with 4 other companies just to kind of see where the industry average is and where Tesla kind of sits and how he's led them. So first, I want to point out that both Tesla and Rivian are EV-only companies, while Ford and General Motors sell EVs, hybrids, and regular gas cars. So that's definitely something we need to take into account when we're looking at these big numbers and the differences in numbers. These numbers were found using the 10Ks for each of the company over these last 3 years. On the 10K for Ford, they have a specific section for their Ford Model E, which is their EV line, kind of. So this specifically is just Ford's EV cars. So we can kind of take that and then Rivian and see a more level playing field, kind of. So in 2025, the revenue for Tesla was 94.827 million. For Ford, it was quite a bit higher, 187.267 million, and then General Motors, 185.019 million. But then here we see Rivian at 5.387 million, and then Ford Model E, so specifically just that, the EVs for Ford, was 6.67 million. So taking these two numbers and comparing that with the Tesla's 2025 revenue, we see quite a big difference. Moving on, we can cover our EBITDA, which is our earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. So Tesla here in 2025, and as we can see, it kind of has gone down a little bit, but we also see that happening across the board. It wasn't just Tesla. We see 10.503 million in 2025. Ford kind of took a toll. They ended up having negative 3.174, and then General Motors, still above Tesla, but again, taking into account that they sell other cars, not just EVs. And then Rivian is, unfortunately for them, been in the negative for the past 3 years. So finally, we can look at the average stock prices over the last 3 years. These numbers down here represent just the average, they were calculated using the average of the closing date from every day throughout 2025. So Tesla, and especially as Tyler mentioned with that whole post and everything, it kind of shot up. Their stock had an average over the 2025 of $357.16, while Ford's was $11.20, General Motors $56.40, and Rivian at $14.10. Also looking at this graph, this is over a 3-year period. The dark blue and then shaded down represents Tesla stock prices. The orange represents General Motors, the green represents Rivian, and then Ford is the light blue line here in the middle. So throughout all the financial analysis, we can kind of see how they are not only, through his leadership, they have not only met industry averages, but kind of gone far above that. Now I'm going to hand it off to Ben to wrap it up.
All right, so now that my colleagues have kind of set the stage for Elon from a leadership and financial perspective, I'm gonna kind of go into his communication style. So this video, I think, kind of shows basically how Musk takes on like quote unquote crazy ideas, whether it's SpaceX, and how he believes in his missions even when the odds are pretty low. So
here we have Elon Musk. Elon, thank you for joining us. Be crazy people, you still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of fear.
So speaking of important things,
like people shouldn't think, people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like you'd have to be something mentally wrong if you shouldn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway?
Yeah, actually something that can be helpful is fatalism to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%. And I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress. If we could just move the ball forward, even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward. So that would still do some good. Same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low.
What do you think the odds of the Mars colony are at this point today?
Well, oddly enough, I actually think they're pretty good.
So like when can I go?
Okay. At this point, I am certain there is a way. I'm certain that success is one of the possible outcomes for establishing a self-sustaining Mars colony, but a growing Mars colony. I'm certain that that is possible. Whereas until maybe a few years ago, I was not sure that success was even one of the possible outcomes. Some equal number of people going to
Okay, so yeah, in that video, you can kind of see like how Elon addresses, like I said, his kind of quote unquote crazy ideas and acknowledges that the odds of success are relatively low, but he doesn't really let that stop him. And he's kind of looking at the end goal and the mission, in a big picture. So that's kind of how he models his communication style when it comes to his involvement in companies like SpaceX and Tesla. Okay, so now kind of moving on to some coaching recommendations that I would aim to implement for Elon Musk. First one being communication filter for public platforms. So we all kind of know Elon Musk for kind of being brash at times with how he interacts on X and other social media platforms. So I think that just kind of adopting some sort of communication filter could benefit him a lot. I think that just having some sort of a structured review process before he posts things, so he can really kind of think about things more clearly and kind of think about the impact that it might have, what he's putting out there. I think that could benefit him in the long run. Another recommendation I would aim to implement is separating visionary messaging from reactive commentary. So kind of in line with the first recommendation, just kind of separating his communication, whether it's through like keynote speeches or presentations like that, and then more kind of informal communication, whether that's through social media or interviews. So kind of separating them and realizing that there's a time and a place to kind of talk about certain things, but if he's representing a company as a whole, maybe kind of think a little bit more clear-headed about certain things. Number 3 is kind of just using internal messaging and more so like delegating that to senior operators and other people within an organization so that he can kind of focus more on innovation, leadership, and other aspects of the company that maybe he should be more focused on, and kind of delegating those messaging tasks to others. And then the final one is implementing structured feedback loops. So I think that possibly introducing like regular town hall meetings or something within his companies could kind of help uplift employee voices and also just give them a lot more trust in his leadership. And then just to kind of wrap up, so I think just in that video that I showed and just from what my colleagues spoke about earlier, I think that Musk kind of demonstrates how powerful transformational leadership, how it can be a driver for clear and ambitious vision. I think that he's demonstrated this ability to kind of push boundaries with his pretty ambitious projects that he's had over the years. And I do think that his leadership style also shows that without kind of that structured communication that I talked about on the last slide, I think that that can pose some problems, but having a balance between that and his ambitious goals, I think can be a struggle. But I think that once he kind of finds that balance, that could help him out a lot. And I think that's something that other organizations and other industries should kind of aim to manage as well. So yeah, that's it.
Questions?
Bless you.